Because even defining perimenopause, how would you actually like give that a definition in itself? It's quite a tricky one because it's the pre-stage, but
It is
it's a hard one.
exactly. I mean, to define perimenopause, we need a new definition of menopause because once you redefine menopause correctly, then perimenopause comes into view behind it. So I like to, currently menopause is defined as a point in time at which you're a year without a period. Now that's a terrible definition. It does not serve women. It makes it about periods, which is a symptom. What about all the women that don't have periods? Like they have an IUD or they've had a hysterectomy or they've had an ablation. Additionally, it draws a line in the sand. Like if you're past this point, suddenly you're fine and you're home free, which you're not. And also ignores the entirety of the symptomatic menopausal woman who starts long before her last period, those symptoms start. So you're just ignoring her entire lived experience and saying that it's about this one day. So I like to redefine menopause in the setting when we're talking about it here in my clinic as the point in time at which we run out of eggs. So menopause is when we run completely out of eggs and we have no eggs or follicles to develop and ovulate. Perimenopause is when we reach a critical threshold and we're running out of eggs. And once you start to talk about what a normal menstrual cycle is, and you start to say, okay, in a normal menstrual cycle, you're going to put out over 100 follicles. You're going to make 100 follicles to get that one egg out in a normal 25-year-old menstruating female. But in perimenopause, you're running out. So maybe you have 6, maybe you have 10. And when you start to understand that, you're like, okay, that makes sense. So if I have less follicles, then I'm making less hormone. And then maybe I don't ovulate. So maybe I don't make progesterone. And the whole thing becomes clear. So redefining menopause helps you to then lay down a definition of perimenopause.
And you mentioned you were, 38, 39 and almost, no, you're far too young. You can be having these symptoms. It couldn't be the perimenopause. But what is the age that people can have? Does it vary? Like what makes it vary? Are there any rhythms or patterns, or is it all quite random?
So the best way of kind of predicting when you will go through menopause is to ask when your mother went through menopause. So there is a genetic, link there. You're more likely to go through menopause around the time that your mother went through menopause. But when you think about when you could go into perimenopause, in the US, the average age of menopause is between age 51 and 52. And perimenopause can start 15 years before that. We know
Wow.
that normal menopause can be anywhere between 45 and 55, with the average age at 51, 52. So if you go through menopause at 45, you could have started your perimenopausal symptoms when you were 30.
That's pretty wild. Oh my goodness, you could have
Very
15
big window.
years. Yeah, you could have 15 years of the symptoms. And then we're going to go like let's go for it. What do? We have these symptoms. We come to you and we say like, Noor, help me, I'm feeling all of these things. I think it might be perimenopause. Maybe we've got to that, that point of we're sort of identifying it. What's your advice? What do you start? Because I imagine also it's not as simple as just smacking a prescription down. These women will be vulnerable. They will be upset. They will be burnt out of trying to find out what it is. By the time you alluded to, a lot of people come to you after they've tried everything else. They could even be very heavily on another medication. What do you do? What do you say?
So when we have I spend an hour for my first visit, really to kind of dissect the whole story. What is the history? When did it start? What are the symptoms? What have you tried? What is your medical history? Tell me about your pregnancies. When was your first period? What was that like? We want to know everything, right? We want to really, really paint a clear picture of what happened before now. So taking a really great history and allowing the patient to tell me their story is fundamental to the beginning of our relationship. And I ask people a very open-ended question. Tell me why you're here. Tell me everything. And people will tell me everything generally. If I'm quiet and I let them speak, they will tell me the whole story in their own words. And it's important that I listen to that. Now, if a patient presents and she's perimenopausal and I think her symptoms are perimenopausal, I will start her on treatment that day. We will get her going on some treatment that day because she's looking for relief and we need to give her relief. But in the background, I do a lot of workup. We have a DEXA scanner here, so we get an idea of bone density and body composition, what other concerns, because a lot of these women, especially if they've been perimenopausal or menopausal for a long time, their bones aren't great, right? So they've got osteopenia or osteoporosis, and that's a conversation we need to have. And
So
then
they
we
could
do a
actually
full,
have osteoporosis. Could it be an early stage? Because when you say osteoporosis, you kind of think of someone who's very elderly and frail. But actually, is there different levels almost to that it can develop for a long time?
oh yeah. I mean, I've put 30-year-olds in my scanner and they have osteoporosis.
Really?
That's why I bought
Um,
my own scanner because I wasn't going to rely on anybody else scanning them. It's terrifying. But unfortunately in the US, we don't, everything is with insurance, and insurance won't cover a bone density scan as a screening test for a woman until she's between 60 and 65. And oftentimes it's too late. Like, prevention is the name of the game. If we want to prevent these midlife diseases like cardiovascular disease, like dementia, like type 2 diabetes, sarcopenia, which is loss of muscle mass, like osteoporosis, we need to be picking that up in their 30s and their 40s at the latest, so that we can offer intervention that's going to stop any progression and maybe improve things overall.